So I've just been listening to Christian's discussion with his ayahuasca therapist, for want of a better term, and it's made me think about how what happened for me in Module 1 of the Field. Massively shaken and disturbed on lots of different levels. And I say that not in a negative way. It's like, okay, these are the parts that I know need to be prodded, so that when I step out to facilitating myself, then I've got more awareness, more range, as Christian would say. So I'm getting that experience, but then I hear Christian and the ayahuasca woman, sorry I can't remember her name, talking about how they were getting ill because of the work they were doing. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not been the case for me. What's the difference between the work I've been doing and the work that they've been doing? And I think there's two pieces there. One is Christian's work, which is like this massive field. He's just really sort of a lot of energy. I totally get the energy moving through that space is extraordinary. And then the other lady, and it sounded like more of a kind of typical therapist. And so she's in the seat with the client. And again, it's like, okay, how come that made her ill? What was it? Is it simply the amount of work that these two people are doing? So I guess there's lots of ingredients. That's one of them. It's like, how much capacity does anybody have? Or is it about balance in life, where it's kind of like, actually, I think if I didn't have kids, I could end up working quite a lot. Whereas my kids over the last 18 years have I've had my attention has been basic kind of real life stuff, in the sense of putting food on the table, and that's balanced out then the time that I'm in the chair as a therapist or as a trainer, and so there's a balance that's created there. So where am I going with this? Yeah, just interested in these different ingredients which contain this alliance and this healing relationship, because that's one of the things that I felt was different on the field. I'm really using that word carefully, because I'm not saying that the way I've done it or the way I do it is right, but I do see that my physiology and my physical health has not been reacting in that way. There's been other aspects of my physical health, and you could say, well, this is what's what, but I'm just going with, this is my sense of it. So my sense of it is, in the way that I've worked, then this containment has contained not just the client or the clients, but also me. And where I've got to with that containment, and what I teach from this place, is that the walls of my therapy room, they hold me, they hold this relationship, they hold this work and magic that's happening. And it's that containment that I'm interested in. Where does that fit in with Heart IQ, with all sorts of different modalities? But there's something here with embodied intimacy. It's kind of like, and maybe it's particularly within the field training. A week long is massive. It's massive for me. And I'm thinking, have I done a whole week of that sort of intensity before? Probably have at some point, but generally it's an unusual experience. And I've done some long form trainings, but not with this kind of intensity. So it's something like, okay, what's the lesson for me here about how bringing in my as a therapist, relational, long term. There's the different kind of elements of attachment that goes on, and this containment, this kind of contractual nature, it's a lot clearer in a sense. I'm the therapist, my client's the client. And also the work is much more complex than that. I don't like that simplicity, and that simplicity's there. where maybe in the field it's not quite as clear cut. And that's something which I'm kind of, yes, it's a question mark for me there. How do we make that clearer cut? Because if I was facilitating that space, it would be clearer for me and for the participants in front of me. So how do I kind of do that when I'm a participant on a training where I'm also a facilitator? Confusion, complexity. So there's something about me learning to kind of go, okay, what's my uniform in this situation? And then I want to come back to this containment, because when I ran a group work program for men who'd had unwanted sexual experiences, and the first part of the program was a psychoeducational piece. So they got some of the regulation stuff, some of the experience of catching where they're at, what was going on in their brain, this kind of thing. So that was the psychoeducational point. And then if they were in a stable enough state, then they went on to the process group. And that process group was 20 weeks long. But within that 20 weeks, there was a few sessions of building the group and a few sessions at the end of dismantling the group, or ending, clearing up, tying up loose ends, that kind of thing. And then, so those are the bookends. And then within that, there was, depending on how many people in the group, 8 to 10 weeks where the men would do their work. Their work would be one of those sessions out of those 10 weeks. And then it was a 2-hour group. We'd spend half an hour arriving, and we'd spend half an hour unpacking and setting the intention for the next week. So each man had an hour's time to actually engage with his trauma. So where this came from in me was, in order to heal that edge, or to, that's too grandiose. There were some important healing moments in lots of different ways. But the thing about it was that these men made, not all at all, but they may have talked about their trauma before, but it hadn't had any impact. It hadn't changed anything noticeably in their lives. Again, maybe that's a bit much. It changed some things, but there was something else that they were looking for. There was a depth of healing. And what I created with this container within a container within a container was safety, so they could actually embodiedly engage with that painful place. In order for them to do that in a safe enough way to get a different experience than they had back then when they experienced the trauma, they needed all these levels of containment, because that's what gave them the safety. Let me just give you the example I often use when it comes to containment. Shit happens in people's lives, they have to contain it, because it's not safe for them to kind of go all over the place, because then they're likely to get wounded, shamed, whatever else, and it then will compound their trauma. So they take on a shape of containment in their own bodies. They come and see me for therapy, or they come to the group that I was running, and this partly just my role is in containing, and then there's building the group to contain, and then it's building the session to contain. And so within that, these containers within containers with containers, the client doesn't need to hold it themselves. They can relax, their nervous system can regulate, they can drop away. Okay, for this moment, they don't need to be holding themselves. The field holds them. And in that moment, if they then engage with that trauma and share what they need to share, then the field can go, we hear you. And I guess that to me is the healing edge. And for some of those men, that was a life-changing experience. So to come back to where I started from with this sharing, I'm really interested in where containment fits in what we're learning and what we're delivering, because addressing that on a number of levels is what has worked for me in the facilitation work that I've done. And so there's something about working with these bigger groups that I go, oh, okay, how is this contained? Earth Spirit, just a great container. The amount of people I know who've been to Earth Spirit for different things, it's got this historic ancestral energy that comes in with that containment. We've got Rachel, massively kind of like all of these spaces that she's held, and it's like, okay, great. Then we've got Christian, then we've got Catherine, and it's like, okay, lots of pieces of kind of holding on lots of different levels. And I wonder what the difference between holding and containing is. And I'm remembering my supervision where it's holding is what makes us ill, whereas containment, that contains us as well as the people we're working with. And how do we kind of solidify, make sure those walls are really kind of solid but not rigid? How do we strengthen the banks so that river can flow with ease? And then how do we kind of bring that in? How do we contain that? And I think that's part of what's been the challenge for me over the last kind of since we left the module 1. And it's remembering for me that this is not just a module, this is part of the whole thing. And so we're still in the field. And I'm hoping by the end of December, it's like, okay, yeah, I really get what this container looks like. But there's been times when I've been really like, oh, Jesus. And that has been a gift because it further strengthens my own containment and my own container in my life, my connection to spirits, to nature, the relationships that I have that help to support me, the practices that I do, all that great stuff, which is all about resourcing. So I thank you for listening. If anybody has listened to this, it's me practicing looking into the camera and saying my stuff. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate any feedback you've got. And there's also I'm stepping closer to what my offer is going to be. And my offer is about supervision, which is containing people who contain, and challenging what can be a self-referential place when we don't have somebody keeping an eye on the work that we do. Well, that was straight from my heart. Hope that is of interest to somebody, even if it's just me to replay it. Lots of love. Cheers.